But that's not all that we're going to be talking about this morning. We've got global tension and rising insecurity. We saw over the weekend the terrorism sponsor list that got at least half of the people I know scratching their heads. It would have been lovely if these names had pictures, don't you think? That was the question that came to my mind. Names of these terrorist financiers. Who are they? There are many people with these sorts of names. Multiple people I know have names like that. So why don't we just put their pictures so we know exactly who it is that we're talking about here? But that's not all. The fate of opposition parties and the 2027 elections and the U.S.-Iran ceasefire and deadlock, and of course that U.S. warning to Nigeria. All of that will be coming up today on the program, so please stay with us. And our first guest is already joining us via Zoom. I hear that we have publisher and editor-in-chief of Niger Times, Ehi Brima, joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Mr. Ehi. How are you doing?
Good morning, Kayla, and good morning, Ayo. How are you today?
Very well, thank you. Okay, so we've had a conversation about the INEC chairman. I'm just going to get you to close on that conversation. Should he step aside for some investigation, or is this a mountain out of a molehill?
I think it's too early in the day to ask the INEC chair to step aside. I read something by a former student, a student actually at the University of Jos, now in the university. I don't know whether he's still there, as a university lecturer, vouching for his integrity, when a former minister of sports, Dalong, accused him of bias. But over the weekend, all kinds of stories came up regarding his ex account. I read what Farouk Berugi wrote, saying that he's partisan, he has a bias for APC. But having said that, I like to look, closely into the announcement that INEC made 3 weeks after the March 12 judgment, regarding the current leadership tussle in ADC. As far as I'm concerned, I think INEC jumped gun. Knowing that the party's convention will start tomorrow, they should just have allowed, the party to continue and allow the cases in court to continue, because Nafiu, went to court, former deputy chairman, as it were, saying he didn't resign, his signature was false. But that's clearly, the way I read it is that he's a spoiler in that party. And I think politicians just have a way of creating problems for our democracy, playing. I hope you can hear me. I was muted.
Yes, you were muted for a little bit, but go on. We can hear you now.
The host, yeah. So the crisis in the party, and if you're going to court, clearly to challenge the leadership of David Mark and the other officers, for me, is a matter that has been ousted. The courts have no jurisdiction, on internal affairs of parties. I don't know why Nafi went to court. This is the same person who was at the inauguration of David Mark as the chairman of the party. I think that was sometime in July last year, and he went to court in September. So the curious thing is, David Mark and this party went to the appeal court, not to challenge the leadership tussle, but to say, hey, the Federal High Court has no jurisdiction over this matter. Only for the appeal court to begin to say that the parties should maintain the status quo, anti-belong, whatever that means. All these Latin legalists have a way of throwing their own confusion. We are not lawyers, but I think the letter and the spirit of the law is very important. So we'll wait the judgment tomorrow from the Supreme Court, I think, on this matter, because ADC, they say they're going ahead with their convention. It's so unfortunate that this is a road we have traveled before. If you go back to 1999, after Obasanjo won the election, he clearly went after the AD and to destabilize our party. I think it's the playbook we are seeing today, appointing then the late Bola Ige as Minister of Power. Still, just as we are having now with PDP, some weekends today's a minister in the APC government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So the same story, same song, as Simon Kolawole wrote yesterday, in his column. I believe that we need to make some sense out of the current crisis in all the political parties. And I'm just curious, how come all the parties have one problem or the other? except the ruling party.
They say it's the ruling party that's causing the problem.
Yeah, because
they have infiltrated political parties, destabilizing it. We're hearing people from the ADC saying that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu wants to run unopposed in 2027.
It cannot be that only APC is the party that can manage its own internal affairs very well, and the other parties cannot. I think there's something wrong there. So, if that, as it has been alleged, to destabilize the other parties, so that APC becomes a party for everybody, because that's not democracy. Democracy is ability, freedom to choose, freedom to vote, and I think the ADC. They also need to put the act together. If they knew they have spoilers within the party, within their fold, I think they have taken care of that business a long time ago.
Ayo.
Thank you. I think we have since been joined because there are other issues, as you very well know. And one of the issues that Mr. Brima will also be dealing with is the issue of the rising insecurity in the country. And we understand that Mr. Bish Johnson has since joined the conversation. Mr. Bish Johnson is a retired U.S. captain, and he joins us virtually as well. Good morning, and thank you for joining us this morning. Can you hear me, Captain?
Good morning. Yes, okay. I'm hearing you. Good morning, and thank you for having me.
Yes. There are many insecurity issues happening, both global, territorial, or regional, and local. The global tension, rising insecurity all over the different parts of the world, the U.S.-Iran ceasefire and deadlock, the warning alert in Nigeria, the bombing in the Northeast. On the one hand, these can be seen as issues that are disparaged. On the other hand, there are those who will be looking at the connections to each of the issues. How do you see it, Captain?
Well, Ayo, again, good morning, and thank you for having me. Well, the world as a whole is living on edge. You know, you have, crises all over the world. In which all of them, like you rightly pointed out, are one way or the other related. They are not limited to one particular country, because from what we've seen, from the impact of the war in Iran and how it's affecting almost every country on the planet, it's quite obvious that the world is a global village that very much interconnected in one way or the other and in different ways. And so we are on edge, in short. The whole world is on edge.
So, but then the question is, I mean, you say you have hinted at the possibility of there being a connection in all this. But let's start from home. On the one hand, the bombing in the Northeast is being seen as another airstrike too many, particularly as it affects Nigerian citizens. On the other hand, we hear the governor of Borno State saying that the particular location where the attack took place had been the market, had been closed down as far back as 5 years ago. And then, so what do you make of this? Because according to the governor, at least a statement released from his office, the people that are living in those markets, they are hoodlums and not necessarily civilians. What are your thoughts on that? Because on the one hand, we have to make sure that we protect people. On the other hand, we can't give out too much information. Otherwise, security will be compromised.
Well, I think the information about that bombing, for me, at this point in time, has not quite really evolved. I've been reading a piece that says that it took place in a market in Yobe State. And I hear you are now saying that the governor of Borno State is actually issuing a statement on that particular bombing. And I haven't seen, the report I read didn't even say who was responsible for the airstrikes. I don't know whether it's Nigerian military. Nobody knows who it is. And it's important that we know who actually carried out the airstrike. Because I hope it's not what I am thinking, that somehow terrorists have been able to lay their hands on, unmanned area vehicles and able to arm them to harm people. Now, whether or not they are hoodlums or citizens or not, hoodlums are also citizens. And so unless they break the law, unless they're terrorists, they are still required to be protected under the laws of our land, whether they are hoodlums or not. They remain Nigerian citizens.
Well, for context, the Nigerian military has defended that airstrike, and it actually took place near the Borno-Yobe border. It's a place called Gili Market. A statement actually from the military, the media information officer of the Northeast Joint Task Force, Operation Kadin Hadi, that's Lieutenant Colonel Sonny, was the one that put out that statement. But either way, for a long time, all we heard was Boko Haram. Now it would seem like we're not hearing Boko Haram again, but we just know that there is insecurity. There are those who have said over time that on the one hand, the insecurity issues we are having are related to some kind of supremacist agenda. On the other hand, there are those who are looking at it more as a commercial, profiteering agenda. Are we missing something? Because sometimes it will go on, sometimes it will go off, and all of that. What exactly do you think is going on here? Do you see it as opportunistic, commercial, or supremacist agenda as well?
Well, I don't know about the supremacy angle of it, unless there is further explanation on that aspect. I have always viewed this thing as a commercialized criminal enterprise. Particularly centered around the areas where you have solid minerals. Apart from the Boko Haram ISWAP issues that we have had, that one is purely ideological one. And all the other recent ones, whether you call them banditry or you call them terrorism, have always been centered around solid mineral areas, who controls where and who is responsible for what. In most times, some cases being aided by some foreign people who are determined to mine our solid minerals without going through, the normal due processes that they're supposed to go through to obtain licenses and engage in such businesses. Nevertheless, we are in a very precarious situation in terms of security because we've been going in circles in these security issues. So to me, it appears that we have not actually laid our hand on how we can end this insecurity and end it once and for all. We keep going back to the same thing again, and I keep going back to porous borders, porous borders, porous borders. We must rein in our borders to be able to know who are the internal people who are now fermenting these problems in Nigeria. We need to isolate ourselves from the external problems that are coming through our borders so that we can deal with the ones that are inherent in our country.
Well, Mr. Brimer, I'll come to you on this. One of the things that have been said to us by security consultants on this subject matter is, let us deal with the social problems. Let's deal with the challenges of poverty, of unemployment, and all of those things. That if we're able to deal with those and people can live well, people have what we call comfort, some kind of ease. They don't have to beg for food. They don't have to struggle to make a living. Maybe things will be better, and they will be able themselves to resist the urge to join in or support any of these insurgent activities. What are your thoughts, Mr. Brimer, particularly when we have governments in these states, and I still hear ungoverned spaces?
Yes, thank you, Ayo. It is true that poverty has some direct relationship with crime. When people are hungry, they become angry. When people are dispossessed, they have to look for ways to survive. But we cannot totally relate what is going on now, the widespread, insecurity in Nigeria, to poverty. When this problem of kidnapping started, there was nothing like that before. We could travel, freely to any part of Nigeria, whether by road or by air. But look at what has happened in the last 15 years. Kidnapping became a big deal. Now it is a business. You can imagine the ransoms that have been paid over the years. It's a billion, dollar industry, if you ask me. So Why have we not been able to tame this monster that has grown and grown and grown over the years? Now we talk about terrorism, we talk about banditry, whatever we call them, there is insecurity in the land. I agree that the governors have to do more. Even Mr. President has told them to wet the grass more, make the grass greener. There's a lot of hunger in the land and economic hardship. But most of the people they don't take to crime, apart from just a very minute percentage of those who believe that's the little they need to do to survive. What we were familiar with those days were people, robbing homes, robbing people on the road, not kidnapping, not banditry, not displacing farmers from their farms or having internally displaced persons with the way we have it today. So we have a big problem. And the military, in spite of their best efforts, I've said this several times on this program, are not giving us the kind of outcomes we want. And now we are losing generals, in the battle. Look at the recent case of Brigadier General Hosseini Brahima, a namesake, actually. He's from a state like from Warake, in our East local government area, with Afuz as their capital. And may his soul rest in peace. And of course, all of the other gallant officers in our military who have also died, leaving bereaved families who are mourning them. So it is, soldiers are dying every day. And you just have to find a solution once and for all. I did say that in the past, that if we need to get help from outside, let us get it. And I also, made the point previously that when elections are coming, you see the specter of political violence, killings, linked to insecurity, whether they are instigated, whether they are planned by politicians. I don't have that evidence. But you can see in the last 4 weeks what has been happening in different parts of the country, and the reason the U.S. Department of State gave for shutting down the U.S. Embassy in Abuja is terrorism, is crime-related, offenses and all of that. And even relating, saying that healthcare services cannot provide. I don't even know where that came from. If we're talking about insecurity, I can understand that. So we need to really do more. And to answer your question, Ayo, the governors are not doing enough, even though they're getting more money. They're not doing enough in terms of employment, in terms of providing access to education and healthcare. They are not. Primary healthcare centers, most of them are just not what you recommend for any decent person to go for medical treatment. And I think
just so we don't lose that particular conversation that has to do with that advisory. And you are correct. I'm going to come to you, Mr. Bish Johnson. Terrorism, armed crime, kidnappings, civil unrest, unreliable health care. The U.S. government has limited ability to provide emergency services in many areas. Those are some of the things that we saw from the United States government in this travel advisory to the U.S. Embassy and the consulate in Nigeria. I need you to speak on this travel advisory, and if it's apt, do they have the kind of intelligence that's required for this sort of statement to be made? Are they right on the money with this one, with this advisory that has been given? Are they right in the things that they're saying here? And then I want you to tie that, Mr. Johnson, to this list of 48 individuals and 12 entities. And I think it was released over the weekend. We're still trying to see if we can get that agency, that's the Nigeria Sanctions Committee, to speak on this particular matter. 48 individuals and 12 entities designated as terror financiers by the federal government. As we started this conversation today, one of my issues personally was the fact that these are names that could belong to anyone. If there's a face attached to each of these names, we'll be able to really know who they're talking about. So just to get your thoughts on this advisory and this list of 48 individuals and 12 entities designated by the federal government as terror financiers.
Okay, let me begin with the issue of the advisory. This is a normal routine thing that is done by U.S. Department of State. They've always want to err on the side of caution because nobody wants to be blamed for not doing anything should anything happen to any of their citizens. and it's not particularly unique to Nigeria, although the things that they have listed are almost, things that are of daily occurrences in Nigeria. So in that case, you may say that they are unique to Nigeria. So U.S. doesn't just come out to issue this kind of warnings. They usually have their intel before they issue those kind of warnings. And I've heard you say something about the healthcare system. You know that our healthcare system is not what it's supposed to be. We've had so much brain drain in that sector, some of whom are leaving Nigeria and going to the United Kingdom, and even some of them ending up in the United States. Yesterday, as I was watching television, I think that yesterday or the day before yesterday, they were talking about resident doctors going on strike. Some of all those things are the things that are, rendering, people receiving services in that sector almost impossible. So if they are talking about no reliable healthcare system, we live in this country. We've seen how many times doctors have been on strike, and this time they're on strike. Nobody renders the services that they're supposed to render. And so is it banditry? Are we not recording banditry? Are we not having terrorism in this country? All of the things that the U.S. listed on that warning advisory are the things that are occurring here in Nigeria. And so as a government, which should also be doing that, Nigeria should also be looking around the globe and see where things are unstable, like maybe in Iran, maybe in Lebanon. We should also be issuing similar advisory warnings to our own citizens, because it's better to err on the side of caution than doing nothing and somebody dies. And then in the case of the U.S., it's going to be a congressional inquiry if somebody dies because State Department did not issue warning. But the fact that they have met that governance obligation to their citizens, something happens, they would now say, look, we issued this warning, these individuals just didn't listen. Now, on the issue of, those who are financing terrorism, we've always said this thing. It takes a lot of money to be able to carry out some of these terrorist activities that we see in the country. So people must have to be financing them. And for a long time, Nigerians have been hammering on this particular issue that we are the people financing this act of terror in Nigeria. They should make them public. They should make them public. I am happy that eventually they have made them public, but I think you shouldn't stop at making them public. They should go after those individuals. If they have evidence, I'm sure they must have evidence to be able to add them on that list. If they have evidence, they should go after these individuals, get them arrested, get them prosecuted in a court to the extent of the law, just like what we saw last week, where some terrorists were prosecuted and convicted and sentenced to some jail time. There must be deterrence. If we don't have deterrence, nobody gets punished for all these atrocities that are being committed and meted out against Nigerian citizens. These things will continue to repeat themselves. The government must put its foot on the ground and ensure that there is massive deterrence to those who are involved in all these atrocities that are taking place in the country.
And back to the incident in Gili, the Nigerian Air Force, of course, many people are talking about this statement right now. They've taken notes of the reports that are alleging that this airstrike conducted on Saturday may have affected a local market in Gili. I think what was interesting about this story, Mr. Johnson, was what the governor said, what the Borno State governor said about that particular market. What do you make of it? I heard you say earlier that hoodlums are also people that need to be protected as well. But we have an asymmetrical warfare. Is it possible that maybe the intelligence our troops had, maybe some of these terrorist elements were hiding in places that are public, like a market? Is there a possibility that that has happened? And in cases like that, because it's not the first time we've heard this. In cases like that, what should happen when we have terrorist elements or bandits hiding in civilian enclaves, whether it's a market or a village? How does the military how are they supposed to handle that situation based on your expertise?
Okay, it's not unusual to have terrorists embed themselves within civilian population. In fact, it's a normal thing. That is the way they protect themselves. Is to use ordinary citizens as human shields. So it does happen, right? Now, whether or not we have to obliterate an entire population because 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 10, whatever, how many terrorists may be embedded in that population is totally a different matter. unless you're going after a high-value target, at least that's how it is done in the U.S., unless you have people at the level of, say, Osama bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri or someone like Abubakar Shekau, you know, those high-value targets that are embedded in such population, that is only when you can take such an action and accept the level of collateral damage that we have seen in this instance. There have, like you said, there have been too many instances of this nature where citizens just suffer for something that they don't even know about. Some of them who may have died here may not even know that there are terrorists that are in their midst. Although I won't conclude like that until they actually hear directly from the military authorities tell us why such airstrike took place, whether it was an accident, whether it was deliberate, who they were going after, and all of that stuff. But you can't wipe out an entire population because you're going after one or two terrorists. The military has to do the hard work, although, you know, there will be more risk to it, but you must do the hard work of going after these people and extricating them from the civil population.
Well, sorry, Mr. Bish, just so people can hear, because on that note that you've made, what the Air Force is saying, in line with this commitment, the Chief of Air Staff has directed an immediate activation of the Civilian Harm Accident and Investigation Cell to immediately proceed to the location on a fact-finding mission on the allegation, and they're saying they're remaining firmly committed to professionalism and accountability. But in that particular strike, we do hear that a terrorist logistics courier identified as Turja Bulu was arrested in Ngamdu town, and on their preliminary investigations, he confessed that he took part in the attack at 29 BDE location on the 9th of April 2026 at Beni Sheikh, which made all of us very, very sad, and has been dispatched by ISWAP from Jili to where most of his fellow terrorists were hibernating to provide food items for another group of terrorists currently hibernating around the Magumeri Gubio general area. So this is a whole ecosystem. And I think I want to come to Mr. Brimer on this as we close out this conversation. This ecosystem around terrorism, we have talked about it, Mr. Brimer, over the years, how this is the way to catch them. Follow the money. They can't live in isolation in the forest. They need food, they need water, they need fuel, you know, and all of these things. So our military doing the right thing, moving in the right direction in this area, even though we're seeing the other side of the story as well. But a step forward in the war against terrorism, you think?
Yes, I think in this instance, it was precision targeting. I mean, the Nigerian Air Force did well. There's no way you will not expect collateral damage. That market, indeed, had been order closed previously. So, and, you know, the military authorities say it is a logistics corridor for terrorists. And so you cannot blame them for, you know, what they have done. They need to take out these terrorists and, you know, actually strike more. Because if that market had been closed, you were wondering what those people were doing there, providing logistics support to terrorists. So there may have been some collateral damages, as was reported in the media. I understand about 21 people in the hospital, you know, both in Yobe and Borno state hospitals. I fully support what happened, you know, in that market, in that border town between Yobe and Borno. And to talk about those that are financing terrorism, and those convicted, I think it's a step in the right direction. It's something we've been expecting. A little bit, maybe late, but I think it's better late than never. I want to commend the authorities, you know, for that, you know, outcome, and they should do more to convict more of this.
Well, we do have to wrap it up there. Mr. Brimer, publisher, editor-in-chief of Niger Times, join us via Zoom from Lagos. Thank you so much for being with us on the program this morning.
Thank you.
And of course, retired U.S. Army Captain, Mr. Bish Johnson. Thanks again for being with us on the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, the conversation around politics doesn't end. And while a lot of people have been accused of moving to the APC, one prominent person from the APC has decided to leave the APC, and he'll be telling us why. Stay with us.